The waitress saw everyone ignoring the CEO's deaf mother, until she suddenly began speaking to her in sign language, leaving everyone speechless. Just before we start, drop a flag emoji that represents your country. The crystal chandeliers of Belmont Restaurant cast prismatic light across white tablecloths as Emma Carter balanced 3 plates on her left arm, her practiced smile never wavering despite the ache in her feet. 5 years ago, she would have been the one sitting at these tables ordering wine without checking the price. 5 years ago, she had a career, a fiancé, and a future that sparkled as brightly as the champagne flutes she now carried. "Miss, this water has a spot on the glass," a woman in pearls said, not bothering to look up from her phone. Emma replaced it without a word, the familiar sting of invisibility washing over her. At 25, she had perfected the art of being seen but not noticed, heard but not acknowledged. It was safer that way, safer than remembering who she used to be. The evening rush was beginning when Emma noticed the elegant woman sitting alone near the window, her hands moving gracefully in the air as she tried to get the attention of passing servers. Emma recognized the frustration in those movements immediately. The woman was deaf and no one was paying attention. Without hesitation, Emma approached the table, her hands already forming the signs. "Good evening, I'm Emma, and I'll be taking care of you tonight." The woman's face transformed, her eyes widening with surprised delight. "You sign? Oh, my dear, I've been sitting here for 20 minutes. No one understands." "I'm so sorry about that," Emma signed, genuine warmth flooding her chest. This connection, this ability to bridge silence with understanding, was the one thing from her old life she could never lose. "What can I get you to drink?" As they conversed, Emma felt lighter than she had in months. The woman, Margaret Thorne, was witty and kind, sharing stories about her garden and her stubborn son who worked too much. Emma found herself laughing, her hands dancing through responses, completely absorbed in the conversation. She didn't notice the man watching from the bar until Margaret's face lit up with recognition. "Alexander. There you are, always late." Emma turned and felt the air shift. Alexander Thorne stood 6 feet tall in a navy suit that probably cost more than 3 months of her rent, his dark hair perfectly styled, a neatly trimmed beard framing a jaw that could cut glass. But it was his eyes that stopped her, storm gray and currently fixed on her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "Mother," he said, his voice deep and controlled, before those calculating eyes slid to Emma. "I see you've made a friend." There was something in his tone, not quite accusation but close. Suspicion wrapped in expensive cologne and entitlement. "This wonderful young woman has been keeping me company," Margaret signed, her hands moving with maternal pride. "Emma, this is my son, Alexander." Emma's professional smile locked into place. "It's nice to meet you, Mr. Thorne. Can I get you something to drink?" "How long have you known sign language?" The question was sharp, delivered like a cross-examination. "Long enough to have a conversation," Emma replied, keeping her voice neutral, even as irritation sparked in her chest. "Your drink order, sir?" Alexander's eyes narrowed slightly as if she were a puzzle that didn't quite fit. "Scotch. Neat. The Macallan 25 if you have it." Of course he would order something that cost $60 a glass. Emma noted it down and turned to leave, but Margaret caught her wrist gently. "Don't mind him, dear. He's suspicious of everyone since his last girlfriend tried to steal company secrets. But I have a good feeling about you." Emma's heart clenched. If only Margaret knew that Emma was the last person anyone should have a good feeling about. She was a walking disaster, a woman whose own fiancé had destroyed her career and reputation because she'd trusted the wrong person. "I'll be right back with your drinks," Emma signed, extracting herself before her carefully constructed walls started to crack. At the bar, while waiting for Alexander's absurdly expensive scotch, Emma caught her reflection in the mirror behind the bottles. Light brown hair pulled back in a neat bun, minimal makeup, the red apron that marked her as service staff. She looked nothing like the confident interpreter who used to work at Boston General Hospital, translating for deaf patients and their families. That Emma had worn tailored suits and carried a leather briefcase. That Emma had believed in love and loyalty. This Emma knew better. "So, you're the signing waitress?" She didn't need to turn around to know Alexander had followed her. His presence was like a shift in atmospheric pressure, commanding attention even in silence. "I'm a waitress who happens to know sign language, yes," Emma said, watching the bartender pour the golden liquid. "Is there a problem?" "That depends." He moved closer, and Emma caught the scent of his cologne, something expensive and woody that probably had a French name. "My mother is very trusting, I'm not." Emma finally turned to face him, tilting her chin up to meet his gaze. Up close he was even more intimidating, all sharp angles and controlled power. But she'd dealt with difficult people before, men who thought their money bought them the right to question her existence. "I'm not trying to take advantage of your mother, Mr. Thorne. I was just being kind to someone who was being ignored. Kindness from strangers usually comes with a price tag." The cynicism in his voice struck a nerve. Emma picked up his scotch, holding it just out of reach. "You know what's sad? That you're so wrapped up in your expensive suit and your suspicions that you can't recognize genuine human decency when you see it." His eyebrows rose, surprise flickering across his features. Clearly, waitresses didn't usually talk back. "That's quite a statement from someone who serves drinks for a living. And that's quite a lot of judgment from someone who doesn't know anything about me." Emma placed the glass on the bar with slightly more force than necessary. "Your scotch, Mr. Thorne. $60 of liquid arrogance. Enjoy." She walked away before he could respond, her heart hammering. That was stupid, incredibly stupid. She couldn't afford to lose this job, not when she was barely making rent on her studio apartment in Dorchester. But something about Alexander Thorne's presumption that she must have ulterior motives just for being kind to his mother had ignited something in her, a spark of the old Emma, the one who didn't let anyone make her feel small. When she returned to Margaret's table with the older woman's wine, Alexander was already seated, his expression unreadable as he watched Emma approach. "I've ordered the salmon for both of us," he said, not quite meeting her eyes. "Unless Mother wants something else?" Margaret shook her head, but her gaze moved between Emma and Alexander with poorly concealed amusement. "Emma, dear, do you work here every evening?" "Most evenings, yes." "Wonderful. Then I'll make sure to request your section when I visit." Margaret's smile was warm, but her neck signs were deliberate, meant for Emma's eyes only. He needs someone who isn't afraid of him. They all tiptoe around like he's made of glass and money. Emma bit back a smile. "I'll check on your dinner shortly." As she walked away, she could feel Alexander's eyes boring into her back. It was unnerving and thrilling in equal measure, like standing too close to a fire that could either warm you or burn you to ash. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of orders and fake smiles, but Emma found her attention drawn back to table 12 again and again. Margaret was animated, her hands moving expressively as she told stories, while Alexander listened with the kind of focused attention that suggested he was a man who heard everything, forgot nothing. When they finally left, Margaret squeezed Emma's hand in goodbye, but Alexander lingered, pulling out his wallet. He placed $200 bills on the table, a tip that was more than she made in 2 days. "For your excellent service," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "And for making my mother smile. She doesn't do that enough lately." Before Emma could respond, he was gone, leaving her standing with $200 and the uncomfortable feeling that Alexander Thorne might be more complicated than his arrogant exterior suggested. Later that night, as Emma rode the T back to her cramped apartment, she stared at the money in her purse. She should be grateful, should take it and pay down her credit card debt, but something about accepting it felt wrong, like admitting that he'd been right to be suspicious, that her kindness could be bought. "You're being ridiculous," she muttered to herself. "It's money. Take it." But as she climbed the 3 flights to her studio, Emma couldn't shake the memory of those storm-gray eyes analyzing her like she was a balance sheet that didn't quite add up. And she definitely couldn't shake the treacherous flutter in her chest when she remembered how his voice had softened, just slightly, when he'd thanked her for making his mother smile. This was dangerous territory. Emma had learned the hard way what happened when she let her guard down around powerful men with charming facades. She'd learned that lesson in Blood and Broken Dreams. Alexander Thorne, with his suspicious questions and his $60 scotch, was exactly the kind of complication she couldn't afford. Even if part of her, a part she thought had died 5 years ago, had come alive under the intensity of his gaze. "Erman, Uro 2." Emma arrived at Belmont the next evening to find a small envelope waiting for her at the hostess stand, her name written in elegant script across the front. "Someone left this for you," Jessica the hostess said with a knowing smile. Tall, gorgeous, looked like he bought his suit in Milan. "You've been holding out on us." Emma's stomach tightened as she opened the envelope. Inside was a note card with the Thorn Industries logo embossed at the top. "My mother would like to see you again. Dinner tomorrow, 7 p.m., same table. She asked me to tell you that your presence would make her very happy. A. Thorn." "What is it?" Jessica leaned over, trying to peek. "A love note?" "Definitely not," Emma said, shoving the card into her apron pocket. "Just a regular customer requesting me." But her hands trembled slightly as she tied her apron strings. This was a bad idea. Margaret was lovely, but Alexander was a problem. A 6-foot-tall problem in an expensive suit who looked at her like he was trying to solve an equation that refused to balance. The evening shift crawled by. Emma caught herself checking the door every few minutes, half expecting Alexander to appear with more questions and accusations. By the time she clocked out, her nerves were shot. The next evening, Emma positioned herself near table 12 15 minutes before 7. She'd spent an embarrassing amount of time that morning choosing her makeup, before angrily scrubbing it off and reminding herself that she was a waitress, not a woman trying to impress anyone. Margaret arrived first, her face lighting up when she saw Emma. "There you are, I was hoping you'd be working tonight." "I wouldn't miss it," Emma signed, genuine warmth flooding through her. "How have you been?" They fell into easy conversation, Margaret asking about Emma's day while sharing stories about her garden. She was particularly proud of her roses, which had finally bloomed after years of careful cultivation. Emma was mid-sign when she felt that familiar shift in the air. Alexander had arrived, and this time his expression was slightly less hostile, though no less intense. "Good evening, Mr. Thorn," Emma said, professionally pleasant. "Alexander," he corrected, settling into his chair with fluid grace. "I think we've moved past formalities after you called my scotch liquid arrogance." Heat crept up Emma's neck. "I apologize for that, it was unprofessional." It was honest. Something almost like amusement flickered in his eyes. Refreshing, actually. Most people tell me what they think I want to hear. Margaret watched this exchange with barely concealed delight, her hands moving quickly. "Emma, dear, my son tells me you made quite an impression on him." "Mother," Alexander's voice held a warning note. "He asked the restaurant manager about you," Margaret continued, ignoring her son's discomfort. "Wanted to know your schedule, how long you'd worked here. I told him he was being creepy, but he insisted he was just being thorough." Emma couldn't help it. She laughed. The image of this intimidating CEO being scolded by his mother was too perfect. Being thorough about the waitress? That's definitely creepy. Alexander had the grace to look slightly embarrassed, a faint color touching his cheekbones. "I was ensuring that my mother would have consistent service." "You were being paranoid," Margaret signed, then turned to Emma. "He's convinced everyone is after our money. Last year, a woman dated him for 6 months just to steal client information, made him even more impossible than usual." "Mother, I don't think Emma needs to hear about my personal life." "Why not?" "She already knows you're suspicious and drink expensive scotch. Might as well know you're also terrible at relationships." Emma bit her lip to keep from smiling. Watching Alexander Thorn squirm was unexpectedly entertaining. "Should I give you two a moment?" "No, please stay," Margaret signed quickly. "You're the most interesting thing to happen around here in months. Besides, I want to know more about you. How did you learn to sign?" The question landed like a stone in Emma's chest. This was the moment she'd been dreading, the inevitable backstory question that she couldn't answer without revealing too much. I had a deaf friend in college," Emma said, the practiced lie slipping out automatically. "We were close, so I learned to communicate better." Alexander's eyes sharpened. He didn't believe her. Emma could see it in the way his jaw tightened, the way his fingers drummed once against the tablecloth before stilling. "That's lovely," Margaret signed. "It's not an easy language to master. You must have quite a gift for it." "Can I start you with drinks?" Emma asked, desperate to change the subject. "The usual for both of you?" As the evening progressed, Emma found herself drawn into conversation whenever she stopped by their table. Margaret was curious about everything, where Emma grew up, what she liked to read, whether she had family in Boston. Emma answered carefully, revealing just enough truth to seem genuine while keeping the devastating parts locked away. Alexander mostly watched, occasionally asking a question that felt more like a test than genuine interest. Where did she go to college? What did she study? Why waitressing if she had a degree? Emma deflected with practiced ease, but she could feel him cataloging every hesitation, every too careful answer. "You're very private," he observed, after Margaret excused herself to the restroom. His gray eyes pinned Emma in place. "Most people enjoy talking about themselves. Maybe I'm just not most people, Mr. Alexander." "No," he said slowly, studying her face like it was a document he was reviewing for hidden clauses. "You're definitely not. You have a degree in linguistics from Northeastern University. You're 25 years old. You've worked at Belmont for 8 months, and before that you worked at 3 other restaurants in the greater Boston area. You move around a lot." Emma's blood ran cold. He'd had her investigated. "That's incredibly invasive. That's due diligence. My mother has become attached to you very quickly. I needed to make sure you weren't a threat." "A threat?" Emma's voice rose slightly, drawing glances from nearby tables. She lowered it, leaning closer. "I'm a waitress who was kind to your mother. That's it. That's the whole story." "Is it? Because a woman with a degree in linguistics doesn't usually spend years bouncing between restaurant jobs. So either you're running from something or you're looking for something. Which is it?" The accuracy of his assessment stole her breath. Emma straightened, her professional mask sliding back into place. "I think I should check on your salmon." "Emma, your dinner will be right out, Mr. Thorne." She escaped to the kitchen, her hands shaking as she leaned against the cool metal prep table. He'd had her investigated. Actually hired someone to dig into her background. What else did he know? Had his investigator found the gap in her employment 5 years ago? Had they discovered why Emma Fletcher had become Emma Carter? "You okay?" Chef Marcus asked, concern in his dark eyes. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine," Emma lied. "Just a difficult table." She pulled herself together and returned with their entrees, determinedly keeping her interactions brief and professional. But when she placed Alexander's plate in front of him, he caught her wrist, not hard, but firmly enough to make her pause. "I'm not trying to hurt you," he said quietly, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "I'm trying to protect my mother. She's lonely since my father died, and she latches onto people. I need to know that you're not going to take advantage of that." Emma met his gaze, letting him see the steel beneath her careful exterior. "I would never hurt Margaret. Unlike some people, I don't use kindness as a weapon." She pulled her wrist free and walked away, feeling his eyes on her back like a physical touch. When Margaret returned, the older woman seemed to sense the tension. Her hands moved slowly, carefully. "Did Alexander upset you? He means well, but he has all the social grace of a corporate merger." "I'm fine," Emma signed, managing a smile. "Just busy tonight." But Margaret wasn't fooled. She reached out and squeezed Emma's hand. "My son has forgotten what it's like to trust people. His ex-fiancée broke his heart and tried to destroy his company. He's been alone ever since, convinced everyone wants something from him." Emma's throat tightened. She knew that feeling, the bone-deep certainty that trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. "I'm sorry that happened to him." "Don't be sorry. Help him remember that not everyone is a villain." Margaret's eyes were knowing, kind. "And maybe let him help you remember that not everyone is a threat." How did she know? Could Margaret see the walls Emma had built? The way she kept everyone at a careful distance? The rest of the evening passed in uncomfortable silence from Alexander, though Emma caught him watching her several times with an expression she couldn't quite read. Not suspicion, exactly. Something else. Something that made her pulse quicken, despite her better judgment. When they left, Margaret hugged Emma goodbye, an unexpected gesture that made Emma's eyes sting with tears she refused to shed. Alexander handed her another generous tip, but this time he included a business card. "My private number," he said, "in case my mother needs anything." She started asking the restaurant for your schedule. Emma looked down at the embossed card. "Alexander Thorne, CEO, Thorne Industries. A phone number, an email address. Direct access to a man who probably had more money in his checking account than she'd earn in a lifetime. I'm just a waitress, Alexander. I can't be your mother's companion. I'm not asking you to be. I'm asking you not to disappear if she reaches out. He paused, something vulnerable flickering across his features. She talks about you. Says you remind her of someone. She won't say who, but she's happier after seeing you. I can't remember the last time I heard her laugh like she did tonight. The admission cost him something. Emma could see it in the tension in his shoulders, the way he didn't quite meet her eyes. This proud, arrogant man was asking her for help, and he hated every second of it. Okay, Emma heard herself say. If Margaret reaches out, I'll respond. But this doesn't mean you get to investigate me further. Deal? Deal. He extended his hand. All business now. Thank you. Emma shook his hand, and electricity arced between them, sharp and unexpected. They both felt it. She saw his pupils dilate, heard his breath catch. He pulled away first, shoving his hands into his pockets. Good night, Emma. As she watched them leave, Emma pressed her fingers to her wrist where he'd touched her, feeling her pulse race beneath the skin. This was dangerous. This growing connection to Margaret, this unwanted awareness of Alexander. Emma had built her life around staying invisible, staying safe. Letting people in meant they could hurt you, and Emma had the scars to prove it. But standing in the soft glow of Belmont's chandeliers, clutching a business card that felt like both a promise and a threat, Emma couldn't deny the truth. She wanted to say yes. To Margaret's friendship, to Alexander's complicated presence in her life. She wanted it despite every instinct screaming at her to run. 03. 3 days later, Emma's phone buzzed with an unknown number. This is Margaret. Alexander gave me your number. I hope that's all right. Would you like to have coffee with me tomorrow? No restaurant, no sun hovering, just two women talking, my treat. Emma stared at the text for a full minute, her thumb hovering over the reply button. This was crossing a line. Margaret wasn't just a customer anymore. She was becoming something more. Something that scared Emma with its potential for real connection. I'd love to, she typed back before she could overthink it. They met at a small cafe in Beacon Hill, and Emma arrived to find Margaret already waiting at a corner table, her face lighting up when Emma walked through the door. You came, Margaret signed, pulling Emma into a quick hug. I was worried Alexander scared you off with his interrogation techniques. It takes more than a suspicious CEO to scare me off. Emma signed back, settling into her chair. They talked for 2 hours. Margaret shared stories about her late husband, Thomas, who had died 3 years ago from a sudden heart attack. She spoke about Alexander's childhood, how serious he'd always been, even as a boy. How he'd taken over the company at 28 after Thomas's death and had barely slept for a year. Determined to prove he was worthy of his father's legacy. He pushes everyone away. Margaret signed, sadness creeping into her expression. After what Rebecca did, stealing from the company, selling secrets to our competitors, he built walls. I'm the only one he lets close, and even then he treats me like I'm made of glass. Rebecca was his fiancée? Emma asked, though she already knew the answer from office gossip and overheard conversations at Belmont. For 2 years. I thought she was the one. Margaret's hands trembled slightly. Finding out she'd been using him the entire time broke something in him. He settled the lawsuit quietly, paid her off to avoid a public scandal. But the damage was done. Emma's chest ached. She knew that kind of betrayal. The kind that made you question every moment, every word, wondering what was real and what was carefully constructed manipulation. I'm sorry, Emma signed. That must have been terrible for both of you. Margaret studied her for a long moment, her wise eyes seeing too much. You understand that kind of pain. I can see it in you, dear. Someone hurt you badly. Emma's hands froze mid-sign. She wasn't ready to talk about Michael, about the way he'd systematically destroyed her career and reputation when she'd discovered he was embezzling from the non-profit where they both worked. Wasn't ready to explain how her own fiancé had framed her, made it look like she was the thief, leaving her with a ruined name and legal bills she was still paying off. We've all been hurt. Emma finally signed, deflecting. It's how we survive it that matters. Margaret reached across the table and took Emma's hand, squeezing gently. I think you and Alexander have more in common than either of you would like to admit. You both hide behind walls pretending you don't need anyone. I'm pretty sure your son and I have nothing in common except shared acquaintance with you. Oh, I don't know about that. Margaret's smile turned mischievous. He's asked about you 3 times since our last dinner. Trying to sound casual, but I know my son. You've gotten under his skin. Heat flooded Emma's face. He's probably just making sure I'm not a con artist. If that were true, he would have lost interest after the background check came back clean. But instead, he keeps finding excuses to bring you up in conversation. Mother, did the waitress mention where she went to college? What did you and Emma talk about for so long? It's quite entertaining, actually. Emma didn't know how to respond to that. The idea of Alexander Thorne thinking about her outside of their brief interactions felt impossible, and thrilling, and terrifying all at once. Margaret, I need to be honest with you about something, Emma signed, the words spilling out before she could stop them. I'm not the person you think I am. I have a past that's complicated and messy, and if Alexander digs deep enough, he's going to find things that will make you regret befriending me. Then tell me now. Margaret signed simply. Tell me your story, and let me decide. So Emma did. Not everything. She couldn't bear to reveal the full depths of her humiliation. But enough. She told Margaret about being an interpreter at Boston General, about falling in love with Michael, about discovering his crimes and having it all twisted back onto her, about the legal battle that drained her savings, about losing her certification because the allegations had tarnished her reputation, about having to rebuild her life from nothing. I'm not running from anything illegal, Emma finished, her hands shaking. But I am running from shame, from failure, from the person I used to be who was stupid enough to trust the wrong man. Margaret was quiet for a long moment, tears tracking down her cheeks. Then she stood, walked around the table and pulled Emma into a fierce hug. My dear girl, she sighed when she finally pulled back. You're not running from shame, you're surviving. And that takes more courage than anything else. Emma couldn't stop her own tears then, the weight of 5 years of isolation cracking under Margaret's acceptance. Alexander needs to know, Margaret signed firmly. Not because he'll judge you, but because he'll understand you both do. Please don't tell him, Emma begged. Let me, if it comes up, let me tell him myself, in my own time. Margaret hesitated, then nodded. I'll keep your secret. But Emma, don't wait too long. My son is like a dog with a bone when something interests him. He'll figure it out eventually, and it's better if he hears it from you. Over the next 2 weeks, Emma's life developed an unexpected rhythm. Coffee with Margaret twice a week. Dinners at Belmont where both Thornes appeared. Alexander slowly thawing from suspicious to merely cautious. Margaret would chatter away in sign language while Alexander watched Emma with those penetrating gray eyes, occasionally asking questions that felt less like interrogations and more like genuine curiosity. She learned that Alexander was a terrible cook who survived on takeout and restaurant meals, that he worked 16-hour days and hadn't taken a vacation in 3 years, that he played piano beautifully but never performed for anyone except Margaret, that he donated millions to deaf education programs in his father's memory, but refused to let anyone publicize it. And Emma, despite every warning bell in her head, found herself softening toward him. The way he listened to his mother with complete attention, reading her signs even when his phone was buzzing with what were undoubtedly urgent messages. The way he'd quietly ensured that Belmont staff all learned basic sign language after witnessing how his mother had been ignored. The way his eyes softened when Emma made Margaret laugh. You're staring again, Emma said one evening as she refilled his water glass. They'd progressed to a sort of mutual teasing that danced dangerously close to flirtation. I'm observing, Alexander corrected. There's a difference. What's there to observe? I'm a waitress. Pretty boring. You're a terrible liar, Emma Carter. That's what I'm observing. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. You carry yourself like someone who used to be in charge. You use vocabulary that suggests extensive education, and you know sign language at a level that requires years of practice, not just a college friendship. Emma's pulse quickened. Maybe you're seeing things that aren't there. Or maybe you're hiding things that are. But his tone wasn't accusatory. It was almost gentle. I understand keeping secrets. I have plenty of my own. Before Emma could respond, Margaret returned from the restroom, and the moment dissolved. But Emma carried Alexander's words with her for the rest of her shift, turning them over in her mind. Later that night, as Emma was leaving through the back entrance, she found Alexander waiting beside a sleek black Mercedes. Her heart stuttered in her chest. "Need a ride?" he asked, his hands in his pockets. "It's late, and this neighborhood isn't the safest after midnight. I take the T every night, I'm fine. Humor me." He opened the passenger door. "Margaret would kill me if something happened to you on your way home." Emma knew she should refuse, should maintain the careful distance she'd preserved despite their growing familiarity. But it was cold, and she was tired, and the thought of the long ride home on the train suddenly felt overwhelming. "Okay," she said, sliding into leather seats that probably cost more than her monthly rent. They drove in silence for the first few minutes, the city lights painting patterns across the windshield. Alexander handled the car with the same controlled precision he brought to everything else. Smooth, confident, completely in command. "Can I ask you something?" Emma finally said. "Depends on the question. Why do you care? About me, I mean. You could have warned your mother away, forbidden her from seeing me. Instead, you show up to dinners, you drive me home. Why?" Alexander's jaw tightened, his knuckles whitening on the steering wheel. For a moment, Emma thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Because my mother hasn't been this happy in 3 years. Because watching you two sign together reminds me of how she was before my father died. And because—" He paused, seeming to weigh his next words carefully. "Because I was wrong about you. That first night I thought you were manipulative, calculating. But you're not, you're just kind, genuinely kind, and I don't know what to do with that." The raw honesty in his voice stole Emma's breath. She turned to look at him, seeing vulnerability in the set of his shoulders, in the way he couldn't quite meet her eyes. "You could try accepting it," Emma said softly. "Accepting that sometimes people are kind because that's who they are, not because they want something. In my experience, everyone wants something. Then your experience has made you cynical and suspicious, and that's sad." Alexander glanced at her then, surprise and something else, something heated, flashing in his eyes. "You don't pull your punches, do you? Life's too short for false politeness." A smile tugged at his lips, the first real smile she'd seen from him. It transformed his face, softening the harsh lines and making him look younger, less burdened. "My mother was right. You are good for me." They pulled up outside Emma's building and Emma's stomach sank. The old brownstone looked shabby in the Mercedes headlights, paint peeling, windows grimy. This was her reality, the after picture of what happened when your life imploded. "Thank you for the ride," Emma said quickly, reaching for the door handle. "Emma," Alexander's voice stopped her. "Whatever you're running from, whatever secrets you're keeping, I want you to know that I understand. And when you're ready to tell me, I'll listen. No judgment, just listening." Emma's throat tightened. She nodded, not trusting her voice, and fled into her building before the tears could fall. Upstairs in her tiny studio, Emma leaned against the door and let herself feel everything she'd been holding back. The growing affection for Margaret, the dangerous attraction to Alexander, the terror that when they inevitably discovered the full truth about her past, they'd both walk away. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Got home safe?" "A." Emma smiled despite herself, typing back, "Yes. Thank you again for the ride. Anytime. Margaret wants to know if you're free for lunch on Saturday. She's planning to kidnap you for shopping." Emma laughed. "Tell her I'd be delighted to be kidnapped. Consider yourself warned. Mother's idea of shopping involves at least 5 hours in every boutique in Newberry Street. Wear comfortable shoes." Emma curled up on her second-hand couch, her phone warm in her hand, and let herself imagine, just for a moment, that this could be her life. Real friendships. Kindness without ulterior motives. Maybe even something more with a gray-eyed CEO who was learning to trust again. But reality intruded quickly. Because while Emma was falling for the thorns, someone from her past was about to resurface. Someone who wouldn't be content to let her hide in anonymity. Michael Foster had discovered where she was, and he was coming back to finish what he'd started 5 years ago. Emma just didn't know it yet. Source 4. The photograph arrived at Belmont during Tuesday's lunch rush, slipped into an envelope addressed to Emma Carter, and left at the hostess stand. Jessica handed it to her between tables, waggling her eyebrows suggestively. Another mysterious delivery. You're like a character in a romance novel. Emma opened it absently, expecting maybe a note from Margaret about their upcoming shopping trip. Instead, her blood turned to ice. It was a photograph from 6 years ago. Emma in a professional blazer, standing outside Boston General Hospital beside Michael Foster. He had his arm around her waist, both of them smiling at the camera, young and in love and completely unaware of the devastation coming. On the back, written in Michael's distinctive scrawl, "Found you. We need to talk about unfinished business. I'll be at Belmont tonight at 8 p.m. Don't make a scene, Emma. You know what I'm capable of." The plate Emma was holding slipped from her fingers, shattering across the floor. Shards of porcelain scattered like her carefully constructed peace of mind. "Emma!" Chef Marcus rushed over, concern etched on his face. "Are you okay? Did you cut yourself?" Emma stared at the broken pieces, her mind racing. Michael was coming here. Tonight. After 5 years of silence, of restraining orders and lawyers and rebuilding her life from nothing, he'd found her. Her voice cracked. "I need to talk to the manager." 20 minutes later, Emma sat in the back office, her manager Paul looking at the photograph and the threatening message with growing alarm. "Do you want me to call the police? This looks like harassment." "No." Emma's hands trembled as she took the photo back. "I'll handle it. But I need tonight off, please. Emma, if someone's threatening you, he's not going to hurt me, not physically." "Not again," she added silently. Michael's weapons had always been more subtle. Whispered lies, doctored documents, character assassination delivered with a smile. "But I can't be here when he comes. I just can't." Paul studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Take tonight. Take tomorrow too if you need it. But if this escalates, I want you to go to the police, understood?" Emma fled Belmont before her shift even started, her mind spinning. She should warn Margaret and Alexander. Should tell them that her past was about to collide with their present in the messiest way possible. But the thought of seeing disappointment in Margaret's kind eyes, suspicion returning to Alexander's face, it was too much. Instead, she went home, double-locked her door, and tried to figure out what Michael could possibly want after all this time. Her phone rang at 7:30. Alexander's name flashed on the screen. "Mother is worried," he said without preamble. "She texted you 3 times about shopping on Saturday and you haven't responded. She's convinced something's wrong." "Everything's fine," Emma lied, her voice hollow even to her own ears. "Just busy. You're a terrible liar, remember? I told you that." His voice softened. "Emma, what's going on? The restaurant said you called out sick, but you don't sound sick, you sound scared." The concern in his voice nearly broke her. "I can't, Alexander, I can't talk about this right now." "Then let me come over. You shouldn't be alone when you're this upset." "No!" Emma practically shouted it, panic rising in her throat. "I mean, no thank you, I'm fine. I just need some time." Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken questions. Finally, "If you need anything at all, call me. Promise?" "I promise." But Emma knew she wouldn't call, because Alexander Thorne was the kind of man who fixed problems, who threw money and lawyers and resources at obstacles until they disappeared. And Michael wasn't the kind of problem that could be fixed by money or power. He was a poison that seeped into everything, contaminating by proximity. At 8:15, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You weren't there. Disappointing. Let's try again tomorrow. Same time, same place." Or I start making calls, starting with Thorne Industries. I'm sure Alexander would love to know all about Emma Fletcher and her criminal record. Criminal record. The words made her physically ill. The charges had been dropped eventually, but the arrest was still on her record, still came up in background checks, still followed her like a shadow. Emma spent the night pacing her tiny apartment, memories crashing over her in waves. Meeting Michael at a fundraiser, falling hard and fast for his charm and ambition. Working together at the Children's Hope Foundation, believing they were making a difference. Finding the discrepancies in the books, confronting him, watching his face transform from loving to calculating in the span of a heartbeat. "You won't tell anyone," he'd said, so confident. "Because if you do, I'll make sure everyone knows you were in on it. Your signature is on half these documents, Emma. Who do you think they'll believe? The trusted program director with 15 years of experience, or his naive girlfriend who handled the paperwork?" She'd told anyway. Had gone to the board with evidence, with printouts and emails and her own testimony. And Michael had been ready. He'd planted evidence, forged her signature on documents she'd never seen, created a trail of communications that made it look like she'd been the mastermind. The arrest had been humiliating. The trial, though ultimately resolved in her favor, had destroyed her professionally. No one wanted to hire an interpreter who'd been accused of embezzlement, even if the charges were dropped. Emma Fletcher had died in that courtroom. Emma Carter had been born in its ashes. The next morning, exhausted and terrified, Emma knew she had no choice. She had to face Michael, had to find out what he wanted and try to protect the small piece of happiness she'd managed to build. She texted Alexander, "I'm sorry about yesterday. Can we talk? Coffee at 10 a.m.? His response came immediately. "I'll pick you up at 9:45. When Alexander's Mercedes pulled up outside her building, Emma took a deep breath and climbed in. He looked tired too, his usually impeccable appearance slightly rumpled as if he'd slept in his office. "You look terrible," were his first words. "You really know how to make a girl feel special." Despite everything, his lips twitched. "I meant you look exhausted." "What's going on, Emma? And please don't tell me you're fine, because we both know that's not true." Emma stared at her hands, gathering courage. "Someone from my past contacted me. Someone I thought I'd never have to deal with again. An ex? My ex-fiancé. The one who destroyed my career and framed me for crimes I didn't commit." The words tumbled out, 5 years of silence breaking like a dam. "His name is Michael Foster. We worked together at a nonprofit. He was embezzling, I discovered it, and instead of confessing, he made it look like I was the guilty one." Alexander's hands tightened on the steering wheel, his expression darkening. "Were you charged?" "Arrested and charged. The case was eventually dismissed when my lawyer found proof of Michael's alterations to documents, but by then the damage was done. I lost my certification as an interpreter, lost my reputation, lost everything except the legal bills." Emma's voice cracked. "I had to start over completely. New name. Well, my middle name. Carter instead of Fletcher. New city, new career. And now he's found me. And he's threatening to tell you everything unless I meet with him." "Did you?" Alexander's voice was carefully controlled, but Emma could hear the anger beneath it. "Meet with him? No, I couldn't face him. I ran instead, like I always do." Emma finally looked at Alexander, expecting to see disappointment or suspicion. Instead, she saw fury, but not directed at her. "Give me his name and contact information," Alexander said, his voice cold and precise. "I'll take care of this." "Alexander, you can't just—" "Watch me." He pulled out his phone. "I have lawyers on retainer who specialize in harassment and extortion. If this man is threatening you, he's going to regret it. He has evidence. He has photographs and my old employment records, and if he goes public, then I'll go public first." Alexander turned to face her fully, his gray eyes blazing with protective intensity. "I'll hire the best PR firm in Boston. We'll tell your story, the real story, before he can twist it. We'll make sure everyone knows you were the victim, not the criminal." Emma's throat closed up, tears burning behind her eyes. "Why would you do that? You barely know me. And once this comes out, your mother, Margaret, will be disappointed. She'll think I lied to her. My mother already knows." At Emma's shocked expression, Alexander continued. "She told me last night. Said you'd confided in her about your past, that you were carrying around guilt and shame for something that wasn't your fault. She's worried about you, Emma, we both are." The tears fell then, hot and fast. All this time, Emma had been terrified of judgment, of rejection, and instead she'd found acceptance, protection, people who wanted to fight for her, instead of using her wounds against her. "I don't deserve this," Emma whispered. "I don't deserve your help. Stop." Alexander reached over and took her hand, his palm warm and solid against hers. "Stop thinking you have to earn basic human decency. You were the victim of a crime, Emma. That doesn't make you damaged or unworthy. It makes you a survivor." Emma squeezed his hand, drawing strength from his certainty. "Michael wants to meet tonight at Belmont, 8 p.m. Then we'll be there. You, me, and my head of security. We'll record everything he says. Massachusetts is a one-party consent state, and if he makes any threats, any demands, we'll have him arrested for extortion. He's smart. He won't say anything directly actionable. Then we'll outmaneuver him." Alexander's smile was sharp, predatory. "I didn't build a multi-million-dollar company by letting bullies win. Your ex-fiancé is about to learn what happens when he threatens someone under my protection." Under my protection. The words settled around Emma like a warm blanket, simultaneously comforting and terrifying. Because protection implied obligation. Implied that Alexander cared about her as more than just his mother's friend. "Why are you doing this?" Emma asked again, needing to understand. "Really? You could walk away right now. Tell your mother I'm too complicated, too much baggage. Why fight for me?" Alexander was quiet for a long moment, his thumb unconsciously stroking across her knuckles. "Because somewhere between that first night when you called my Scotch liquid arrogance and watching you make my mother laugh for the first time in 3 years, you stopped being a stranger. You became someone I can't walk away from even when it would be easier, even when it's complicated." Emma's heart stuttered. "Alexander, I know. Wrong timing, wrong circumstances. But I needed you to know." He released her hand, started the car. "Now let's go get you ready to face your past, and this time you won't be alone." That evening, Emma walked into Belmont with Alexander at her side and Marcus Chen, head of Thorne Industries Security, trailing discreetly behind. She wore one of her work uniforms, a small act of defiance, a reminder that she wasn't ashamed of where she'd ended up. Michael was already seated at a corner booth, and Emma's stomach lurched at the sight of him. He'd barely changed, still handsome in a smooth, practiced way, his suit expensive but not ostentatious. He stood when he saw her, that familiar smile spreading across his face like oil on water. "Emma, you look well." His eyes slid to Alexander, assessment and calculation flickering behind false warmth. "I see you've moved up in the world. Trading in your scrubs for a billionaire. Always were ambitious. Mr. Foster." Alexander's voice could have frozen fire. "I'm going to give you one chance to walk out of here and never contact Emma again." Michael laughed, actually laughed. "You must be Alexander Thorne. Emma has a type. Successful men who can advance her career, though I have to say landing a CEO is impressive even for her." Emma felt Alexander tense beside her, but she stepped forward, finding her voice. "What do you want, Michael? Why come after me now after 5 years?" "Want? I don't want anything except to reconnect with an old friend." Michael's smile was poison wrapped in charm. "I've been thinking about you, Emma, about how things ended between us. I was hoping we could clear the air. By threatening to expose my past to my employers and friends, that's not clearing the air. That's blackmail." "Blackmail?" Michael pressed a hand to his chest in mock offense. "I simply suggested we meet to talk. Is it my fault if the truth about your criminal history might damage your new relationships?" Marcus Chen moved closer, his presence hulking and purposeful. Ms. Carter's record was expunged. Any attempt to use it against her constitutes harassment. Michael's eyes flickered with something, annoyance, maybe fear, before his mask slid back into place. "I'm not trying to harass anyone. I'm trying to have a conversation with my ex-fiancé." "Then have it," Alexander said coldly. "Say what you came to say." Michael leaned back, studying them. "Fine, I'll be direct. I've been offered a position at a non-profit here in Boston. Major donor relations, excellent salary. But before I accept, I need to make sure there won't be any complications. Emma and I have history. I wanted to ensure she's not going to cause problems for me professionally." The audacity of it stole Emma's breath. "You want me to stay quiet? To let you work in this city after what you did to me?" "What I did? Emma, we both made mistakes. You were the one who went to the board with half-formed accusations, who tried to destroy my reputation. I was defending myself. You framed me." Emma's voice shook with rage. You altered documents, forged my signatures, and let me take the fall for your crimes. I was arrested because of you. Lost my career because of you. That's your version. Mine is quite different. Michael pulled out his phone, scrolling through something. I have emails here, Emma. From you. Talking about how we could skim funds without anyone noticing. Detailed plans for covering our tracks. Those are fake. You fabricated all of it. Can you prove that? Because I have digital forensics experts who can authenticate these emails. They'll show they came from your account, your IP address. If I were to share these with, say, the Boston Globe, along with information about your arrest, he let the threat hang in the air. Alexander moved so fast Emma barely registered it. One moment he was beside her, the next he had his phone out, screen facing Michael. I've been recording this entire conversation. You just confessed to possessing fabricated evidence and threatened to use it to harm Ms. Carter's reputation. That's textbook extortion in Massachusetts, punishable by up to 5 years in prison. Michael's face went white, then red. You can't. I just did. Now here's what's going to happen. Alexander's voice was deadly calm. You're going to delete every file you have related to Emma. You're going to decline that job offer in Boston, and you're going to disappear from her life permanently. If you don't, I'll not only press charges for extortion, but I'll also hire investigators to look into your current employment. I'm guessing they'll find interesting discrepancies in your expense reports. You're bluffing. Try me. I have unlimited resources and a personal vendetta against men who hurt women I care about. Alexander stepped closer, and even Emma could feel the danger radiating from him. Walk away now or I will destroy you. And unlike Emma, I have the money and connections to make it stick. For the first time, Michael looked genuinely afraid. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This isn't over. Yes, it is. Alexander handed his phone to Marcus. Send the recording to the police and to my lawyers if Mr. Foster does anything at all to contact or harass Ms. Carter. I want him arrested immediately. Michael fled, his confident facade crumbling. Emma watched him go, 5 years of fear and shame draining away with each step he took toward the door. When he was gone, Emma's legs gave out. Alexander caught her, guiding her into the booth Michael had vacated, and suddenly she was crying. Huge, gasping sobs that came from somewhere deep and wounded. It's over, Alexander murmured, holding her as she fell apart. You're safe. I promise you, Emma, you're safe. And for the first time in 5 years, Emma believed it. Darananjo 5. Margaret's living room felt like a sanctuary 3 days later as Emma sat curled on the plush sofa, tea warming her hands. Alexander had insisted she take a week off from Belmont. Paid leave, he'd called it, though Emma suspected the money was coming from his personal account rather than the restaurant. You don't have to do this, Emma had protested. I'm not doing anything. You earned time off and the restaurant agreed. The lie was transparent, but Emma was too exhausted to fight it. Now, with afternoon light streaming through Margaret's floor-to-ceiling windows and classical music playing softly in the background, Emma felt the last pieces of her armor finally crack open. Tell me everything, Margaret signed, setting down her own teacup. Not just about Michael, but about who you were before. I want to know the real Emma Fletcher. So Emma told her. About growing up in Portland, Maine, the only hearing child in a deaf family. About learning ASL before English. About becoming her parents' interpreter at doctor's appointments and parent-teacher conferences before she was 10 years old. About falling in love with language and communication. About her dream of bridging worlds for people who felt isolated by their differences. I was good at it. Emma signed, the movements feeling like coming home. Really good. I worked at Boston General for 3 years and patients would request me specifically. I loved making people feel heard, feel understood. You still do that, Margaret signed. You made me feel heard that first night at the restaurant. Emma smiled through fresh tears. I thought I'd lost that part of myself. Thought Michael had taken everything that mattered. But signing with you, it reminded me that he couldn't steal who I fundamentally am. The front door opened and Alexander walked in, his suit jacket slung over one arm, tie loosened. He stopped when he saw Emma, something soft and unguarded crossing his face before his usual controlled expression slid back into place. Mother, are you monopolizing Emma again? Someone has to, Margaret signed. You're too busy being broody and mysterious. Alexander rolled his eyes, but Emma caught the affection in the gesture. I'm going to change. Emma, will you stay for dinner? I'm ordering from Giacomo's. The North End Italian place? Emma's eyes widened. Alexander, that's incredibly expensive. It's dinner, not a marriage proposal. Say yes before mother guilt trips you into it. Margaret was already nodding enthusiastically, and Emma found herself laughing, agreeing. This, sitting in Margaret's beautiful home, feeling safe and wanted, it was more than she'd allowed herself to hope for. While Alexander was upstairs, Margaret pulled out a photo album, showing Emma pictures of Thomas Thorne. He'd been a kind-looking man with laugh lines around his eyes and Margaret's same warm smile. We met in college, Margaret signed. I was the only deaf student in the business program, and he was this confident, charming guy who decided he was going to learn sign language to ask me out. He was terrible at first. He accidentally told me my hair looked like a confused octopus instead of beautiful. Emma laughed, imagining young Thomas fumbling through signs. How long were you married? 35 years. Every morning he'd sign I love you before anything else. Even after all that time, even when he was angry with me about something silly, that was always first. Margaret's hands trembled slightly. Losing him felt like losing my voice. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. Emma signed back, thinking of how Michael's betrayal had stolen her voice in a different way, had made her afraid to speak up, to trust, to be herself. Alexander is like his father in so many ways, Margaret continued. Loyal to a fault, protective of people he loves, terrible at expressing his emotions. But Thomas knew how to be vulnerable. Alexander hasn't learned that yet. He's been hurt. So have you. But you're learning to open up again. I see it happening. Margaret reached over and squeezed Emma's hand. Don't give up on him. He's worth the wait, worth the complicated parts. Emma wanted to protest that there was no him and her, no relationship beyond friendship and circumstantial proximity. But the truth was becoming harder to deny. The way her heart jumped when Alexander walked into a room. The way his rare smiles felt like a reward she'd earned. The way being near him made her feel both terrified and exhilarated. Alexander returned wearing jeans and a soft gray sweater that made his eyes look like storm clouds. Emma had never seen him in casual clothes. He looked younger, more approachable, though no less devastating to her peace of mind. Dinner arrived and they ate in Margaret's formal dining room, the conversation flowing easily between signed and spoken words. Alexander asked Emma about her family, and she found herself sharing stories about her parents' bakery in Portland, about her younger brother who was studying marine biology. Do you see them often? Alexander asked, twirling pasta around his fork. Not as much as I should. After everything happened with Michael, I was ashamed. Didn't want them to see how far I'd fallen. Emma stared at her plate. They don't even know I'm working as a waitress. I've been telling them I'm freelancing as an interpreter. You should visit them, Margaret signed. Family forgives. Trust me on this. Later, as they cleared the dishes, Alexander caught Emma's arm in the kitchen, his touch gentle but purposeful. I need to tell you something about what happened with Rebecca. Emma's breath caught. They'd danced around this topic, his ex-fiancée who'd betrayed him, but Alexander had never offered details. You don't have to. I want to. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed, looking more vulnerable than Emma had ever seen him. Rebecca and I met at a charity gala. She was smart, beautiful, came from a respected family. Everything looked perfect on paper. But it wasn't. She was working for our biggest competitor the entire time. Every business strategy I shared, every client list I mentioned, every vulnerability in our operations, she was reporting it all back to them. For 2 years, I was in love with a woman who was systematically trying to destroy my company. Emma moved closer, drawn by the pain in his voice. How did you find out? A whistleblower at the competing firm. They sent me proof, emails, recordings, payment records. Rebecca had been compensated handsomely for her espionage. Alexander's jaw clenched. The betrayal wasn't even the worst part. It was realizing that nothing had been real. Every touch, every word of love, every moment I thought we'd shared. It was all calculated manipulation. I'm so sorry. Emma reached out without thinking, covering his hand with hers. That kind of betrayal changes you. It made me into someone I didn't recognize. Someone who suspected everyone, who couldn't accept kindness without questioning motives. I was drowning in cynicism. Alexander turned his hand over, threading his fingers through Emma's. And then you walked into my mother's life and you were so genuinely kind to her. No agenda, no ulterior motive. Just pure, uncomplicated compassion. It forced me to question everything I'd convinced myself about people. I'm not that pure, Emma whispered. I'm scared all the time. Scared of getting hurt again. Scared of trusting wrong. Scared of this? Alexander stepped closer, his free hand coming up to cup her face. This thing that's been building between us since that first night? Emma's pulse raced. She should step back, should preserve the safety of distance. But Alexander was looking at her like she was something precious and rare, and Emma was so tired of being afraid. Terrified, she admitted, and me too. His thumb brushed across her cheek, the touch feather-light and electric. But I'm more terrified of not taking the chance, of letting fear win again. Alexander. He kissed her. Soft at first, questioning, giving her room to retreat. But Emma didn't retreat. She rose on her toes, her hand sliding up his chest to his shoulders, and kissed him back with 5 years of loneliness and longing behind it. Alexander groaned, deepening the kiss, one hand tangling in her hair, while the other pressed against the small of her back, pulling her closer. Emma melted into him, feeling safe and desired and utterly overwhelmed by the intensity of her feelings. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Alexander rested his forehead against hers. I should probably ask you on an actual date before kissing you in my mother's kitchen. Emma laughed, the sound breathless and giddy. Probably. Though you've already bought me expensive dinners and driven me home multiple times. We might be doing this backward. Dinner, tomorrow night. Somewhere that isn't Belmont, where you'll actually let me pay without arguing. His eyes crinkled with amusement. Say yes. Yes. Emma's smile felt like it might split her face. But nowhere too fancy. I don't own anything appropriate for 5-star restaurants. Then we'll go somewhere casual. I know this little bistro in Cambridge that makes the best coq au vin in the city. No dress code, no judgment, just good food and conversation. They were still standing close, neither quite ready to let go, when Margaret appeared in the doorway. Her hands moved in delighted signs. Finally, I was beginning to think I'd have to lock you in a room together. Emma buried her face against Alexander's chest, mortified, while his laugh rumbled through her. How long have you been standing there, Mother? Long enough to see that you've stopped being an idiot. Emma, dear, I'm thrilled. Alexander, if you hurt her, I will disown you, and leave everything to Emma instead. Duly noted. Alexander pressed a kiss to the top of Emma's head, and the casual affection of the gesture made her chest ache with happiness. Later, as Alexander drove Emma home, they talked about everything and nothing. Movies they loved, books that had changed them, embarrassing childhood stories that made them both laugh. It felt easy in a way Emma hadn't experienced since before Michael, like she could just be herself without calculating every word. I have to tell you something, Emma said as they pulled up to her building. About why I really left my career. It wasn't just Michael's betrayal, it was... She took a breath, forcing herself to continue. My parents wanted me to take over the bakery. It was their dream, their legacy. But I chose my career instead, chose the hospital job, chose to build my own life. And then I lost it all anyway. Sometimes I think what happened with Michael was karma for disappointing them. Alexander turned off the car, shifting to face her fully. That's not karma. That's trauma talking, trying to convince you that you deserved punishment for having your own dreams. You didn't. You don't. How do you know? Because I went through the same thing with my father. He built Thorn Industries from nothing, and when he died, everyone expected me to fail. And to prove that his success was about him, not something that could be sustained. Every decision I made was scrutinized, every mistake magnified. I almost destroyed myself trying to be worthy of his legacy. What changed? Mother. She sat me down one day and reminded me that Dad built the company because he wanted to create something meaningful, not to trap me in someone else's vision. She said the best way to honor him was to make the company my own, to bring my own values and ideas to it. Alexander reached over and took Emma's hand. Your parents' bakery is their dream. Your interpreting career was yours. Both are valid. Both are valuable. You didn't deserve to lose your dream just because it wasn't theirs. Emma squeezed his hand, feeling something heavy lift from her chest. Thank you. For understanding. For not judging. Never. He leaned across the console and kissed her again, slow and sweet and full of promise. Now go get some sleep. I'm picking you up at 7 tomorrow for our proper first date. 7? That's practically dinner time. Which is when normal people eat. I promise not to turn into a pumpkin. Emma laughed and climbed out, then leaned back through the window. Alexander, I'm really glad you turned out to be less terrible than I thought that first night. And I'm really glad you turned out to be exactly as extraordinary as you seemed. His smile was soft, genuine. Sweet dreams, Emma. As she climbed the stairs to her apartment, Emma felt lighter than she had in years. Her phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. He's smiling, actual smiling, not the fake business smile. Thank you for bringing my son back to life. Now go make him work for it, don't let him win too easily. Emma grinned, typing back. I wouldn't dream of it. She fell asleep that night thinking about storm-gray eyes and the way Alexander had looked at her in his mother's kitchen, like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking for years. For the first time since Michael destroyed her life, Emma let herself hope that maybe, just maybe, she was allowed to be happy again. 6. The bistro in Cambridge was everything Alexander had promised. Intimate without being stuffy, elegant without being pretentious. Soft jazz played in the background, and candlelight flickered across the small tables draped in white linen. Emma had agonized over what to wear, finally settling on a simple navy dress she'd bought at a consignment shop, and the one pair of heels she owned that didn't hurt after an hour. Alexander's expression when he picked her up, appreciation mixed with something deeper, something tender, made all her anxiety worthwhile. You look beautiful, he'd said, and the sincerity in his voice had made Emma's heart stutter. Now, 3 courses into their meal and 2 glasses of wine in, Emma felt relaxed in a way she couldn't remember feeling since before everything fell apart with Michael. Okay, confession time, Alexander said, leaning back in his chair. I cannot for the life of me understand cryptocurrency. Everyone keeps telling me it's the future, but I just see elaborate digital monopoly money. Emma laughed so hard she nearly snorted her wine. Really? The tech-savvy CEO doesn't understand Bitcoin? I understand the technology. I don't understand why people think it's a legitimate investment strategy. He grinned at her laughter. What about you? What's your controversial opinion? I think roses are overrated. Everyone loses their minds over roses, but give me wildflowers any day. Duly noted. No roses for future gift-giving occasions. The casual reference to a future together made Emma's chest warm. They were really doing this, testing the waters of an actual relationship, moving beyond circumstantial proximity into deliberate choice. Can I ask you something? Emma set down her fork, suddenly nervous. Where do you see this going? Us, I mean. Alexander's expression turned serious. Honestly? I don't know. I haven't done this, the dating thing, the relationship thing, since Rebecca. I'm probably going to mess up, say the wrong thing, revert to being an suspicious workaholic. But I know I want to try. With you. I'm going to mess up too. I'll pull away when things get too intense or panic when you get too close to my walls. I'm kind of a disaster when it comes to trust. Then we'll be disasters together. He reached across the table and took her hand. No pressure, no expectations. Just taking it one day at a time, figuring it out as we go. Emma nodded, relief washing through her. I can do one day at a time. They were finishing dessert, creme brulee that Emma insisted was the best thing she'd ever tasted, when Emma's phone buzzed. She ignored it at first, but it buzzed again. And again. I'm so sorry, Emma said, pulling it out. Let me just... Her blood went cold. 3 texts from Jessica at Belmont. Emma, there's a woman here asking about you. She says she's Michael's wife. She seems really upset. Should I give her your number? Emma, what's wrong? Alexander was already on alert, reading the shift in her expression. Michael's wife is at Belmont looking for me. Emma's hand shook as she showed him the texts. I didn't even know he was married. Of course he is, men like that always are. Alexander was already signaling for the check. Come on, we'll deal with this together. 20 minutes later, they walked into Belmont to find a woman in her early 30s sitting in the waiting area, her eyes red-rimmed and haunted. She stood when she saw Emma, and something desperate crossed her face. You're Emma Fletcher? Or Emma Carter now? I'm Emma, and you are? Diane Foster, Michael's wife. She laughed bitterly. Though I'm guessing you didn't know he had a wife. That was always his specialty, compartmentalizing his lies. Emma exchanged glances with Alexander, then gestured to a quiet corner booth. Let's talk. Diane's story came out in a rush. She and Michael had been married for 4 years. She'd discovered his pattern of fraud 6 months ago, a trail of manipulated documents and stolen funds at his current employer. When she'd confronted him, he'd admitted to past mistakes, but claimed he'd changed. Then I found the emails about you, about some old business he needed to clean up in Boston. Diane's hands twisted in her lap. I did some digging, found the court records, the articles about the Children's Hope Foundation case, found your name mentioned as the accused, then later as the victim when charges were dropped. Why come here? Emma asked gently. Why tell me this? Because I need your help taking him down. Diane looked between Emma and Alexander with desperate determination. He's doing it again, embezzling from his current employer, setting up someone else to take the fall. But this time I have proof. Bank statements, email records, digital trails he thought were hidden. I want to go to the authorities, but my lawyer says I need more than just financial evidence. I need testimony from his prior victims establishing a pattern. Emma's stomach clenched. You want me to testify against Michael? I know it's a lot to ask. I know testifying means going public, means everyone knowing what he did to you. But Emma, if we don't stop him now, he'll just keep doing this. Keep destroying lives and walking away clean. Tears tracked down Diane's face. He told me he loved me. We have a daughter, Emma, a 3-year-old little girl, and he's been stealing from people while playing devoted husband and father. Alexander spoke for the first time, his voice carefully neutral. Emma doesn't owe you or anyone else her trauma. If she's not comfortable testifying, I'll do it, Emma interrupted, surprised by her own certainty. I'll testify. I'll give a deposition, talk to prosecutors, whatever you need. Emma, are you sure? Alexander's concern was palpable. This will mean reliving everything. I'm sure. Emma turned to face him, finding strength in his steady presence. 5 years ago, I was alone and terrified, and Michael almost destroyed me. But I'm not alone now, and I'm not scared anymore. If my testimony can stop him from hurting anyone else, from hurting Diane or her daughter, then I have to do it. Diane sobbed with relief, reaching across the table to squeeze Emma's hands. Thank you. God, thank you so much. They exchanged information, Diane's lawyer's contact details, evidence she'd already compiled, a timeline for when charges would likely be filed. Alexander took notes on his phone, already strategizing about legal support and PR management. When Diane left, Emma sat in the quiet booth feeling shaky but resolute. Alexander slid into the seat beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. You're incredible, he murmured against her hair. Brave and compassionate and incredible. I'm terrified. You can be both. Terror and bravery aren't mutually exclusive. He pulled back to look at her. But you don't have to do this alone. I'll be with you for every deposition, every court appearance, whatever you need. You really mean that, don't you? You're not just saying it because we're dating. I'm saying it because He stopped, something vulnerable and raw crossing his face. Because you matter to me. A lot. More than is probably wise after such a short time. Emma's breath caught. Alexander. I'm falling for you, Emma. Have been since you told me my scotch was liquid arrogance. And I know it's too soon to say it. Know we're supposed to take things slow. But I need you to know that when I say I'll be there for you, I mean it with everything I am. Emma kissed him, pouring 5 years of loneliness and longing into it, letting herself be vulnerable and open in a way that still scared her. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, She rested her forehead against his. I'm falling for you too. It terrifies me, but I'm doing it anyway. Then we'll be terrified together. Over the next 6 weeks, Emma's life transformed. She gave detailed depositions about Michael's fraud at the Children's Hope Foundation. Diane's evidence, combined with Emma's testimony and a whistleblower from Michael's current employer, built an airtight case. Michael was arrested, charged with multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and identity theft. The media coverage was intense. Emma's story, a victim framed by her fiancé, who'd spent 5 years rebuilding her life, became headline news. But Alexander's PR team managed it brilliantly, controlling the narrative, ensuring Emma was portrayed as the survivor she was, rather than the criminal Michael had tried to make her. Margaret was Emma's constant companion through it all, attending depositions when Alexander couldn't leave work, providing quiet support and fierce protection. The older woman had become more than a friend. She'd become the mother figure Emma hadn't realized she'd been missing since moving away from her family. You should call your parents. Margaret signed one afternoon as they had coffee. Tell them the truth. They deserve to know what you've been through. So Emma did. She called her parents, confessed everything, the arrest, the shame, the years of hiding. And they surprised her by immediately booking flights to Boston, showing up on her doorstep with tears and hugs and the kind of unconditional love Emma had been too afraid to accept. You're our daughter, her father had signed fiercely. Nothing could make us love you less. We're just sorry you went through this alone. Alexander gave Emma her old life back too, in an unexpected way. He quietly reached out to the Massachusetts Interpreter Certification Board, providing evidence of Emma's wrongful accusation and subsequent exoneration. Within 2 months, her certification was reinstated. I don't understand, Emma said when Alexander handed her the official letter. How did you? I made some calls, expedited some processes, ensured the right people saw the right evidence. He shrugged, but his eyes were soft. You deserve your career back, Emma. You deserve everything you lost. Emma cried, then laughed, then kissed him breathless. Thank you. For believing in me. For fighting for me. Always, he promised. Michael's trial was surprisingly quick. Faced with overwhelming evidence and multiple victims willing to testify, he pleaded guilty to avoid a longer sentence. He was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison, his assets frozen to pay restitution to all his victims. Diane divorced him, won full custody of their daughter, and started a non-profit supporting fraud victims. She and Emma became unlikely friends, bonded by shared trauma and the satisfaction of justice served. The day the verdict came down, Alexander took Emma to a surprise location, the Children's Hope Foundation, where a new wing was being dedicated. The plaque read, "The Emma Carter Wing for Deaf and Hard of Hearing Children, in honor of a woman who never stopped fighting for those without a voice." Emma stood frozen, tears streaming down her face as she read the dedication. Alexander had done this, had donated enough money to build an entire wing in her name, restoring her reputation while helping the organization that had been tainted by Michael's crimes. I don't know what to say, Emma whispered. Say you'll consider coming back. Not here necessarily, but to interpreting. The hospital called. They want you back on staff. Full benefits, better pay than before, your choice of departments. They want me back. They never wanted you gone. But once you were accused, their hands were tied. Now that your name is cleared, you're their first call. Alexander pulled her close. I want you to be happy, Emma. If that means waitressing at Belmont, I support you. If that means going back to interpreting, I support you. Whatever makes you feel whole again. Emma buried her face in his chest, overwhelmed by gratitude and love. I want to go back. I want to help people again, to use my skills for something meaningful. Then you will, and I'll be cheering you on every step of the way. 6 months later, Emma walked into Boston General Hospital wearing professional clothes and a lantern. She was assigned to the pediatric wing, interpreting for deaf parents and their hearing children, bridging communication gaps and making families feel heard. It felt like coming home. Alexander proposed on the 1-year anniversary of the night they met. Back at Belmont, at the same table where Margaret had first been ignored and Emma had first extended kindness. He got down on one knee in front of a restaurant full of people, Margaret signing rapidly beside him with tears streaming down her face. Emma Carter, you walked into my life and reminded me that not everyone is a villain. You taught me to trust again, to open my heart again. You're brave and compassionate and stubborn and absolutely perfect. Will you marry me? Yes, Emma signed and said simultaneously, laughing and crying as Alexander slid a ring onto her finger. Not a diamond, but a sapphire surrounded by small wildflowers crafted in white gold. 1,000 times yes. They were married 6 months later in Margaret's garden, surrounded by roses and wildflowers. Emma's parents and brother there alongside all the people who'd helped her rebuild her life. Diane and her daughter attended, as did Emma's colleagues from the hospital, and even some staff from Belmont. Margaret officiated. She'd gotten ordained online specifically for the occasion, and her signs were elegant and joyful as she pronounced them husband and wife. I knew from that first night, Margaret signed to Emma during the reception. I knew you were exactly what my stubborn son needed. Thank you for not giving up on him. Thank you for not giving up on me, Emma signed back, hugging Margaret fiercely. As Emma and Alexander danced under string lights, Emma reflected on how much had changed in 2 years. She'd gone from hiding in shame to standing in sunlight, from serving others anonymously to helping families openly, from believing she was broken to understanding she was simply healing. What are you thinking about? Alexander murmured, his lips brushing her temple. How grateful I am. For you, for Margaret, for second chances. Emma looked up at her husband, and smiled. For learning that trust isn't naive, it's brave. Speaking of brave, Alexander pulled back slightly, his expression nervous in a way she'd never seen. I have something to tell you. Margaret has been pushing me to share it, says you deserve to know before we officially start our married life. Emma's heart stuttered. Okay. When I had you investigated that first week, before I knew you, before I understood, I found the court records, found articles about the case, and I also found something else. A sealed record from when you were 14. An incident involving your brother. Emma went still. How did you... Those records are supposed to be sealed. I know. My investigator shouldn't have accessed them. It was wrong, and I'm sorry. Alexander's voice was heavy with genuine remorse. But I saw what happened, how you protected your brother when older kids were attacking him for being hearing in a deaf family, how you took the assault charges even though you were defending him, how your parents fought to get the charges dropped but it still went on your juvenile record. Tears burned in Emma's eyes. That day had been one of the worst of her life, watching bullies torment her little brother, fighting them off, being arrested for assault even though she'd been protecting him. Why are you telling me this now? Because I had those records permanently expunged, used every connection I have to make sure they're completely gone, can never be accessed again. You shouldn't have to carry that weight anymore. Alexander cupped her face, his thumb brushing away her tears. You've spent your whole life protecting people, being their voice, their shield. Let me protect you for once, let me be your shield. Emma kissed him, tasting salt and love and gratitude. You already are. You have been since the moment you decided to trust me instead of your suspicions. They swayed together as the music played, surrounded by people who loved them, and Emma finally understood what Margaret had meant about finding your voice again after losing it. Emma had lost her voice to Michael's betrayal, to shame and fear and isolation, but she'd found it again, in Margaret's kindness, in Alexander's trust, in her own decision to stop hiding and start fighting. And standing in her husband's arms, working a job she loved, surrounded by people who saw her truly and loved her anyway, Emma realized something profound. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving. She was whole. She was home. I love you, Alexander whispered against her hair. My brave, stubborn wildflower girl. I love you too, Emma whispered back. My suspicious, generous, liquid arrogance boy. His laugh rang out across the garden, joyful and free, and Emma laughed with him. Two wounded people who'd found healing in each other, who'd chosen trust over fear, who'd built something beautiful from broken pieces. Together.